Hey everyone, welcome back to She Tried It. Today's video is something that's really exciting that I got to do with you guys through the community tab. So hopefully you're paying attention to the community tab, but about 2 weeks ago, I suggested that we discuss some hot takes, which were kind of like unpopular opinions. I don't know what term you want to call them, but basically we talked about doing 10 hot takes and I wanted to hear y'all's opinion on them, and then I was gonna make a video about how y'all felt about them and then also chime in myself. So, without taking too long with a little intro, let's get right into the hot takes. And if you missed it, feel free to go back to the community tab and add on to it because I think these are really interesting to talk about. The first hot take we have is knit/crochet patterns cost entirely too much money. And for this one, we had 28 people vote, 7% agree, 61% disagree, 32% say both. There are a few additional comments, so let's go through those comments really quick. Max Gray said, patterns cost what they cost because creators should be fairly compensated for their time, but they can really add up. So I do appreciate creators who do things like bundles or discounts when you buy multiple patterns. And I've definitely seen that before. I think that is a great thing to have. RDW said, I think patterns are relatively well priced, at least those I've seen and used myself. The most expensive ones I've seen are about $10, and it's usually because they're super detailed, complex patterns. My sister also brought up a good point that you forever have access to the pattern and can make the product and even sell it in most cases whenever you like. That is an excellent point, actually. Next, we have Maverick Mayhem. They said, in general, price patterns are fair. However, some high price patterns are not worth it. I got one badly written or used charts, and honestly, if the price is over $5, take the time to include a range of sizes and not tell the user to measure. Seriously. That's a good point as well. Cassandra Curtis says, costs are too high for acrylic yarn. Skeins are too small for completing a project. Costs for natural fibers and hand-dyed are priced appropriately or too low. I think this comment response was for a different hot take, but we'll take that into account when we get to that one. For the comments that people gave, I am gonna think out loud right here. So I do agree with Max Gray that there are people that have bundles. There's also something, I forget the term that it's called, but it's like price what's fair or something. And it takes into account that people can't always afford patterns, but there are designers who basically give you a discount if you really can't afford it and just tell you to put in a certain code into the Etsy or Ravelry or something, and it does add a discount to your pattern. Another thing that I think is very interesting is what RDW said about the most expensive being $10. I've seen patterns more than $10. What I've seen is $20, and these patterns are patterns that come in books from certain companies, but there are some patterns that come in books, and because there's multiple patterns, you can't really buy the pattern individually, you just have to buy it in the book. I don't know. If you don't see more than one pattern that you like, then you're kind of stuck paying that total price just to get all the patterns. Another thing that I think is interesting is what Maverick Mayhem said about if it's over $5, you should take the time to give other sizes. I understand where that comment is coming from, and I don't disagree, but there are a lot of designers, such as myself as well, but there are a lot of designers, one, who don't really give the pattern in different sizes, and there are patterns that are kind of made so that you can design it to your own body shape, because I think going with 1X, 2X, large, small, extra small, it's not really what people's actual body sizes are. I forget the term that it's called, but I think it's like tutorial style. So people just kind of give a tutorial on how to make the pattern fit your body. And I think that's really helpful too. So with all that in mind, and with the great comments that y'all left, I think I'm gonna go with the majority on this one and say I disagree. I think that they're priced pretty fairly. I have had my fair share of patterns that I bought that I did not make. I don't make a video on a pattern that I bought that I didn't make because sometimes I'm like, well, maybe I'm the problem. Sometimes I realize maybe the designer's kind of new. Maybe they don't know how to write a pattern, and I don't think that it's my job to put them on blast and say, hey, this person's terrible, you should not be buying their pattern. That's That's rude. So I wouldn't do that. I disagree. I think knit and crochet patterns do not cost entirely too much money. The second hot take is crochet is better than knit. This one we had 32 votes. 22% of people agree, 34% of people disagree, and 44% of people say both. We do have one comment. One comment is from Renee Lee, and they said, I love them both, but for different reasons. I love knitted hats, socks, and wearables. However, for me, crochet is king for blankets and projects I need done quickly. I do understand and mostly agree with where Renee is coming from. I've made a crochet hat. I've never made crochet socks. I love crochet wearables. I mean, I'm wearing a crochet wearable right now. I do think crochet is king for blankets and projects that need to be done quickly. I could never imagine myself, not saying I won't, but I could never imagine myself knitting a blanket. That seems kind of ridiculous to me. I don't know why anyone would do that. You have so many stitches that can fall off. And yes, I know I talk about lifelines and how that can save a project, but why even go through that struggle when you could just crochet a blanket? And it would just be tighter stitches. I just think that it would be better to crochet. So for this one, when it comes to crochet is better than knit, I'm gonna say both, because I don't want somebody thinking that if I disagree with this, that I think knit is better. I have a whole video all about my thoughts on knit versus crochet, and you can definitely go check that out if you want to. I'm gonna agree again with the majority, 44% of y'all. The third hot take we have is just because you knit/crochet doesn't mean you're a supporter of slow fashion. This one we had 26 votes. 88% of you said agree, 4% of you said disagree, and 8% of you said both. There were no additional comments to this, but I thought this was really interesting. There are people that are really into slow fashion and sustainability, and I really admire those people. I would never call myself one of those people because I do shop at fast fashion places and I don't see me really stopping. But one thing I will say is that I don't shop often at fast fashion places. Like, I'm not just constantly buying, but when I need new clothes, I'm not one that's gonna dish out a lot of money on clothes because, you know, why do that? I think that when it comes to this hot take, I'm going to say both, because I think if you're taking the time to make your clothes, for example, this cardigan, I could have gone out and bought a cardigan that looks very similar to this that was fast fashion, I guess you could call. But instead, I took the time to make it, so I went along with slow fashion, if you want to call it that. So even though I may not be a supporter of it, that's one less thing I had to go out and buy. Like, just since I made this, I have no reason to go out and buy a cream colored sweater. I have a cream colored sweater. I think I unintentionally went the slow fashion route, but that doesn't necessarily make me a supporter of slow fashion, because like the top that I'm wearing is from Ross, which is that fast fashion? I don't know. The pants that I'm wearing are from Old Navy. Again, don't know if that's fast fashion. First off, I don't really know what slow fashion is, so I would hate to say that I'm with the whole movement when I don't fully know what it is. But also, I'm dabbling my toe into slow fashion just by making this cardigan, but I can't really go with the whole movement because I'm not all into it. And nothing against people that are into slow fashion and sustainability. I just know me, and I know that I'm not a person that should be the face of anything with that because I'm just not informed enough. I'm gonna say both on this one and go with the 8% of you that say both as well. The fourth hot take we have is if you can't read a pattern, you aren't really a crocheter/knitter. 34 people voted on this. 0% of you agree with this statement. 85% of you disagree, and 15% say both. One comment is from Maverick Mayhem, and they said, disagree, not all designers can document their patterns clearly. Also, sometimes there are mistakes. I'm gonna disagree as well, because I think that there are a lot of people that make some amazing pieces, and they either don't make a pattern for those amazing pieces or they don't even know how to make a pattern for those amazing pieces. I don't think that just because you can't document it in a way that other people can enjoy it means that your art is any less valuable than somebody who can document it. I do think it would be nice if everybody could, but you simply can't take away someone's talent that they have just because they can't go through the steps that other designers can. I do want to encourage people that make really cute stuff on their own but don't know how to make a pattern and can't possibly sell it because they don't know how to write a pattern. I don't think that you should ever stop making just because you can't sell it into a pattern. Keep making, and I think you're still a legitimate crocheter or knitter. And the fifth hot take we have is Swatching doesn't really matter. 33 of you voted on this. 15% said agree, 24% said disagree, and 61% said both. I already know my answer, but there are 4 comments, so let's go ahead and look at those comments really quick. Violet said, I think a lot of people don't consider that even if they swatch, their gauge can change throughout their project, so they end up thinking it's useless when they measure and find that things aren't adding up. It's important to make sure your tension isn't changing throughout your project to get the results you want. Even if you don't have the patience for that, like me, it's still good to swatch just to make sure you're making a fabric you like. Sometimes your favorite stitch looks weird in new yarn. Sometimes you have to change your hook/needle to get the drape you want. It saves time to know that before diving into a big project, even if you aren't measuring for gauge. That's an excellent point. Renee Lee said, it matters when doing size-specific items such as socks and sweaters or trying to use a specific amount of yarn. It doesn't matter when you're doing blankets and such or aren't worried about the yarn usage. I definitely agree with Renee on that one. Max Gray said, depends on the project. I'm not going to swatch for something like a blanket, but if you need something to fit, not swatching is a big gamble. Totally agree with Max on that. Maverick Mayhem said, if changing yarn weight, it's a must, almost. If someone has done the conversion work, then yep, you're golden. Agree with that as well. All in all, when it comes to this hot take, swatching doesn't really matter. I'm again gonna go with the majority and say both. Most of the time, is that accurate? Yes, most of the time when I make stuff on this channel, not only because it's a wearable, but most of the time I do gauge swatch. However, there are times where I just want to get through the project, or I make my gauge swatch on a much smaller scale. For example, the thing I'm working on right now, which will be the next video that you see after this, but the thing I'm working on right now is a dress. And I didn't feel like doing the whole 4" by 4" square. I'm not testing for it. There's actually a whole story to go with the pattern. But anyways, I'm not testing for it. I'm just kind of making it, and I know it's going to be beautiful. So instead of doing a actual size gauge swatch, I did a mini scale gauge swatch, like maybe 2 inches, just to make sure that it's gonna be the size that I want. And I don't know if you can call that gauge swatching or not. It really depends. I do think it's important to take the time to make sure that you have the hook size right, your yarn is working, and it's gonna work up beautifully, and that you're not wasting your time, especially when it comes to something that you're gonna be wearing. Like, you don't wanna make something that isn't gonna fit right. Also, because I'm making a video about it. Like, I don't wanna embarrass myself in front of y'all. So I think it is important to do swatching, but it's not always necessary. There's sometimes where you could just be super confident and know, like, no, this is gonna come out how I want it to, and I don't really need to worry about a gauge swatch. I'm trying to think of the last project that I didn't do a gauge swatch for. The last project I didn't do a gauge swatch for was the Abuela shirt that I made back in July of last year, which seems like a very long time ago. But anyways, if you remember when I was making the crochet shorts, which was the video before that, I started working on this top and I just started crocheting it up. I was using the hook size that the pattern said, and as I was working on the shirt, I realized, oh, this is a little bit too, I think it was too tight if I remember. So I undid the whole thing. I used a larger hook. That one, I didn't do a gauge swatch, but as I was going, I realized, this is not looking how I want it to look, so I pivoted. Now, was that a problem? I don't think so, because the shirt still came out beautifully, and you can check out that video here if you want to see the whole process. The next hot take we have is the 6th one, and it's pattern testing is a ripoff. 28 of you voted on this, 7% agree, 71% disagree, and 21% say both. There are a couple comments, so let's go through those really quick. RDW said, I believe it can be both. Pattern testers usually work for free to provide the pattern maker with an invaluable service that helps the pattern maker create a great product. I think there are great pattern makers that help their pattern testers by providing them with the yarn needed for the end product and/or compensating them with money or access to other patterns, as well as communicating well with the pattern testers. I also see that pattern testers can easily be exploited, especially by large brands that have the funds to pay their pattern testers or at least provide the yarn. That was a lot, and I 100% agree with that, and I'll dive more into that. But Maverick Mayhem said, if the goal is to sell, it's important to test. that is an interesting take as well. So for RDW's comment, I mean, I have nothing really to add to that. I totally agree. I would say both as well. I think that you can be exploited as a pattern tester. I think your job is to help promote the pattern, so you are signing up for that. You know what you're getting into. You're most of the time not getting paid. I haven't pattern tested that many patterns, but I've tested quite a few, and I've never been paid by the designer to test a pattern. I have been given the yarn by a yarn company in some cases, and I have been able to like work the system where I'm working with the company already, and I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna be pattern testing this anyway, and it ends up being a sponsored video. I do realize most people, like 90% of people, do not have that opportunity, so that's not really a common situation. I don't pattern test often, and I've shared my reasons for that as well. I go back and forth on my thoughts on pattern testing, but I think that RDW worded it perfectly. Now, Maverick Mayhem, I have heard this sentiment a lot. I'm not really sure what their take is on if pattern testing is a ripoff, but the statement, if the goal is to sell, it's important to test. Again, I don't disagree with that. I have two patterns right now. One is the wreath that I talked about, and the other one is the skirt. I did not pattern test either of my patterns. Like I said before, there's a new pattern that I want to release this year. I don't plan on testing that one either. One reason is because I don't feel like I have an audience for pattern testing. I'm not a big enough designer. I'm not really known as a designer in the first place, but I'm not a big enough designer with a big enough audience that I could just put on my Instagram or put on my YouTube channel, hey, I want some pattern testers for this pattern. I don't think that I have enough feedback, and maybe it's me. I don't have enough trust that I'd find enough people to make my pattern, get it back to me in a timely fashion, and release the pattern at a specific date. And because I'm not in that situation, I don't think that means that I need to hold back on my pattern. I'm just gonna release the pattern, and if there's a problem with it, or if someone has a question, contact me. If someone finds an issue with it, I'll re-upload a correction to the pattern. But I don't know that in order to sell a pattern, you have to test it. I think I disagree with that sentiment. Not that it's wrong. Again, people that test their patterns are absolutely great. However, there have also been times where a pattern was tested and I still had some issues with this. Just because your pattern test doesn't mean it's foolproof, but that's just, again, my opinion. Okay, the 7th hot take is acrylic yarn is the worst and should never be used. And 29 of you voted on it. 7% say agree, which shocked me, honestly. 86% said disagree, and 7% said both. I mean, if you watch anything on my channel, I'm gonna say disagree. I think acrylic yarn is great. What I'm wearing right now is with color theory yarn. This is qualified as an acrylic yarn, and I think that this cardigan looks super cute, and it's lovely. One of the things I love most about acrylic yarn is I like how warm it is. It is not breathable, so I don't think you should be making everything with acrylic yarn. Definitely branch out. If all you've used is acrylic, try to branch out and see some other fibers you might like. But another pro to acrylic is it's usually really washable. Like, you can just wash it and dry it in the dryer. And the more you wash it, for a lot of times, at least in my situation, the more I wash it, the better it looks. It just looks really, really good. So the 8th hot take we have is weaving in ends on projects is not as bad as people make it seem. 35 of you voted on this one. 46% say agree, 31% say disagree, and 23% say both. Violet said, is it really all that bad? No. Do I still procrastinate in doing it? Of course I do. Sometimes I do get in a mood to craft, but my brain won't allow me to pick up my hooks though. That's when I grab my finished project and start weaving in ends. Seeing a cleaned up finished piece motivates me to start new projects, so it's good to get my creativity back. I think that's a great sentiment. Renee Lee said, I dislike it because I haven't found a way that I enjoy doing it, even after 20 plus years of crocheting and 18 years of knitting. And I can understand that as well. So for me, when it comes to weaving in ends, I'm going to say both. I pretty much always weave in the ends, especially on projects that I make a video about. One, I'm making a video about it, and two, I'm actually trying to wear this stuff in everyday life, and when the ends aren't weaved in, it just looks unfinished, and I don't want that. I want people to be like, what, you made that? That looks store-bought. And if the ends are not weaved in, they'll know you made it. However, with that said, I think we're all familiar with the Gertie cardigan, a beautiful cardigan, and it's a cardigan, so of course I love it. But that was entirely too many ends to weave in. There was no way I was doing that. I made that in November 2021. If I were to pull out that cardigan right now, the ends on that are still not weaved in, and I don't see me am I gonna say ever? I will never say never, but I don't see me weaving in those ends anytime soon. For every other project, it's never been that bad. That is by far the worst. But for every other project, I just kind of take some time on a separate day when I don't have anything else to work on and just work on weaving in the ends, because yeah, it's not that bad. Except when it comes to the Gertie cardigan. That is that bad. So that's why I'm gonna say both, because if you have multiple colors in a project, it's that bad. The 9th hot take today is you don't need to know complicated techniques to make beautiful pieces. 28 people voted on this and 93% agree, 4% disagree, and 4% say both. Maverick Mayhem said, I was taught to crochet by learning doilies. Now, the complicated stitches, especially on garments, make me feel like I'm wearing a table runner. Yikes. Simple stitches with a few fancy stitches work. I think that's a very interesting take. I've never made a doily, but I could see how you would feel that way if it's a little bit too complex. I don't think anyone would be surprised with my thoughts on this, but I'm gonna go with the majority on this and say I agree. The simpler stitches, the more pretty a piece is to me, but I'm a very simple, basic, minimalist person, so that shouldn't be really shocking to any of you. I think that some of the prettiest stuff I made have been very simple. And if we think about it, everything I make is quite simple. Like, I don't make anything too hard. And if I make it that hard, I'm gonna definitely tell you, this is ridiculously hard. I do wanna delve into cables and all that fun stuff one day. I'm not even saying one day soon, but one day I will get into that. And once I really learn it, I know it won't seem so complicated. But right now, doing a very simple stitch like this cardigan, to me, I think it's beautiful. So I would classify this as a simple stitch cardigan. We finally come to the last hot take of the day, and this one's very interesting. The last hot take is, it's best to work on one project at a time. 35 of you voted, 23% said agree, 60% said disagree, and then 17% said both. RDW said, this really depends on what the project is. I totally see where you're coming from with that. If you're working on a cardigan and a blanket, I don't think you need to finish the blanket in order to move on to the cardigan. There are some projects that you could just have as a background project, and that makes total sense. Maverick Mayhem said, if working on a project with fine or fingering yarn, then putting it off might be helpful. I think that is a good point as well, because it's gonna take a little bit longer. So I see where you're coming from with that. I don't disagree with that at all. When it comes to working on one project at a time, I've kind of touched on this before in previous videos, but personally, and again, this is just my opinion, I'm going to say I agree you should work on one project at a time. So I think I've done my channel for about 3 years. The first year, I definitely did one project at a time, and I was so productive. And I still was doing a lot of projects, but I was able to get each project done, and once I finished the project, I would make a video about it. Then the second year of my YouTube channel, I tried overlapping it so I could make more showing the process of everything, and doing the process of everything, those were great videos, but it was really hard for me to like kind of switch gears. But again, that's kind of my nature. I'm good at multitasking, but I'm not really good at just switching gears. I like to see things all the way through before I move on to something else. So maybe I'm not good at multitasking. I don't know. I'll explore that on my own. I just find that I enjoy the process so much better. For example, with this cardigan again, I like that I was able to get this yarn, actually worked on something else, talking of patterns that didn't work out. I worked on a pattern pretty much over halfway through it, did not work out, unraveled the whole thing, and worked on this cardigan. And I like that I got to work on the whole thing, complete it, make a video, and then move on to my next project. I have finished stuff by working on it back and forth, but it's just not my favorite way to work on stuff. I think that whatever you need to do to get your stuff done, or if you just like crocheting and you're not too big on seeing the final product, to do whatever you want to do. And that's it for today. I really enjoyed going over these hot takes with you. I hope you enjoyed it too. I am trying to get y'all way more involved in my videos, so be sure to check out my community tab. Pretty much every single week I have some type of vote or some type of announcement. Don't forget to let me know. I want to release a pattern, and I don't know if I should just make a video on it and like kind of show the process, or if I should release a pattern, or just like with this voting today, should I do both? Let me know your thoughts, and with that, I'll see you in the next video. Bye. I'm gonna leave this video off to the side because this cardigan, it's super cute. I still haven't washed it yet, so I'm gonna go throw it in the washer, and the next time I wear it, y'all are gonna see it after it's like totally blocked, and I think it's gonna be so much drapier and really, really nice. I'm gonna see y'all next time. Bye.